I never thought the woman my son married would corner me in the very house I helped buy, demanding my last dime. When Lucy told me to hand over my savings or get out, she didn't realize I was 10 steps ahead. Greed, you see, makes people incredibly sloppy. When my wife, Martha, passed away from pancreatic cancer 3 years ago, the silence in our 4-bedroom home in Ohio became deafening. For 40 years, that house had been filled with the sounds of her laughter, the smell of her famous pot roast, and the footsteps of our son, David, growing up. Without her, it was just a museum of ghosts. I was 68, retired from a mid-level management job at a logistics firm, and suddenly, entirely adrift. David had always been a good boy, a bit too eager to please, perhaps, but with a heart of gold. He had moved to a wealthy suburb in Connecticut after landing a lucrative corporate job, marrying a woman named Lucy. Lucy was striking, always dressed impeccably, with a smile that seemed perfect for family photos but rarely reached her eyes. When Martha was sick, Lucy sent expensive, impersonal flower arrangements. I tried not to judge her. Not everyone knows how to handle grief. A year after Martha's funeral, David called me. He sounded exhausted. "Dad, the market is crazy right now. We found this incredible property in Westport, but the down payment is astronomical. And honestly, we want you here. We have the space. You shouldn't be rattling around that old house in Ohio all by yourself. Come, live with us." Note: it sounded like a lifeline. I sold the family home for a modest sum and, wanting to help my only son achieve his dream, I gifted them $250,000 for the down payment. It was a massive chunk of change, but I still had my retirement accounts and a solid pension. I kept that remaining nest egg, about $600,000, completely private. My philosophy was simple. I wanted to pay my own way, cover my groceries, and leave a nice inheritance for David and my 5-year-old granddaughter, Lily. When I first arrived in Connecticut, the house was magnificent. It was a sprawling, modern farmhouse with a wraparound porch and a detached guest suite that had been hastily converted into my quarters. For the first few months, it was paradise. I spent my mornings tending to the garden, a hobby Martha and I had shared, and my afternoons playing with little Lily when she got home from kindergarten. But as the seasons changed, so did Lucy. It started with small, passive-aggressive remarks. If I left a coffee mug in the sink, she would sigh loudly and wipe down the granite countertops as if I had contaminated them. If I watched television in the main living room, she would walk in, grab the remote, and switch it to a home renovation show without a word, assuming I'd just leave. I did. I didn't want to cause friction in my son's marriage. Then, the chores began. It wasn't a formal agreement, but somehow, the household staff Lucy used to employ slowly vanished. First, the landscapers were let go. "Arthur, you love being in the dirt so much. I figured you wouldn't mind handling the lawn," she said one morning, sipping her matcha latte while I stared at the 2-acre property. Next went the house cleaner. "We just need to tighten our belts," David explained apologetically, though I noticed a brand new designer handbag resting on the kitchen island that very afternoon. I became the live-in groundskeeper, the chef, and the unpaid nanny. I rationalized it. I told myself I was contributing. I told myself I was helping David, who was working 80-hour weeks and constantly looked like he was on the verge of a breakdown. But the tension was a coiled spring, and Lucy's disdain for me was becoming impossible to ignore. She began inviting her wealthy friends over for extravagant luncheons, introducing me not as her father-in-law, but as David's father, who is staying with us because he has nowhere else to go. Because he has nowhere else to go. She made it sound like an act of profound charity. She conveniently forgot the $250,000 that had secured the very roof over her head. I swallowed my pride. I did it for David, and I did it for Lily. but I started keeping a private journal in my room, documenting the strange inconsistencies I was noticing in the house. The arguments between David and Lucy behind closed doors, the sheer volume of Amazon packages arriving daily, the way Lucy would intercept the mail before David could see it. I didn't know it yet, but the storm wasn't just brewing. It was about to break right over my head. The real nightmare began in late October. David's firm sent him on a critical 2-week business trip to London. It was the longest he had been away since I moved in. The morning his Uber pulled out of the driveway, the atmosphere in the house shifted instantly. The thin veneer of civility Lucy maintained for David's benefit vanished. She stopped buying the groceries I liked. The thermostat in my wing of the house was mysteriously turned down to 60 degrees, and when I tried to adjust it, I found a digital lock had been placed on the control panel. When I asked her about it, she didn't even look up from her phone. "Heating oil is expensive, Arthur. Wear a sweater." On the 4th evening of David's absence, I was in the kitchen, carefully washing the dishes from a dinner I had cooked for Lily and myself. Lucy had been out all day at the country club. She walked in around 8 p.m., smelling faintly of Chardonnay and expensive perfume. She leaned against the island, crossing her arms, watching me scrub a pan. "We need to talk," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. I dried my hands on a towel and turned to face her. "Of course, Lucy. Is everything all right?" "No, it's not," she snapped, stepping closer. "This arrangement isn't working for me anymore." I frowned, genuinely confused. "What arrangement? Living here? Have I done something to upset you?" She let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Done something? Arthur, look around. You're living in a multi-million-dollar estate. You eat our food. You use our utilities. You take up space. You're a financial drain on this family, and quite frankly, David is too weak to say anything about it. He's drowning in stress because of you." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "Lucy, I gave you $250,000 for the down payment of this house. I maintain the yard. I watch Lily. I pay for my own personal expenses." Her eyes narrowed. "That down payment was a gift, Arthur. It doesn't buy you a lifetime pass to be a parasite. David told me about your pension. I know you have money sitting around in accounts doing nothing." She took a breath, her face hardening into a mask of pure entitlement. And then she delivered the line that would change the trajectory of our family forever. "You live here free," she said, her voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss. "So here is how this is going to work. Hand over your savings to me so we can finally fix the hole you've burned in our finances, or find somewhere else to live before David gets back." I stood there, paralyzed by the sheer audacity of her words. My own daughter-in-law was extorting me, extorting a 68-year-old widower. My savings?" I stammered, my mind racing. "That money is for my retirement. It's for Lily's college fund. I'm not giving it to you. Lily is my daughter, and I will decide how she is provided for." Lucy raised her voice, stepping into my personal space. "You have until Friday, Arthur. Transfer the funds into a joint account I control, or I will pack your bags myself and leave them on the curb. And believe me, I will tell David that you became unhinged and abusive, and he will believe me. He always believes me." She turned on her heel and marched upstairs, the click of her heels echoing through the silent, massive house. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my freezing guest suite, wrapped in a quilt Martha had made, staring at the wall. The betrayal stung worse than the cold. I felt a surge of panic. Where would I go? How could I explain this to David? Would he really side with her? But as the sun began to rise, the panic slowly morphed into something else. Anger. Cold, calculated anger. I was an old man, but I wasn't a fool, and I certainly wasn't going to be bullied out of the home I helped build. The next day, while Lucy was out getting her nails done, I decided to do some investigating. I needed to understand why she was so desperate for cash. David made a fantastic salary. Even with her spending habits, they shouldn't be broke. I slipped into David's home office. I felt a pang of guilt. I had never snooped a day in my life, but my survival was on the line. The desk was meticulously organized, but the wastebasket caught my eye. At the very bottom, buried under some shredded documents, was a crumpled, thick envelope. I pulled it out and smoothed the pages. It was a default notice, but it wasn't a mortgage statement. It was a collection letter from a high-yield, predatory private lender. The name on the account wasn't David's. It was Lucy's. I kept digging. I found a hidden folder tucked behind some old tax returns in the filing cabinet. Inside were credit card statements in Lucy's name, maxed out to the tune of $80,000. There were also withdrawal receipts from David's secondary savings accounts he rarely checked, completely drained. She had been siphoning his money for months, funneling it into bad investments, luxury goods, and an underground high-stakes poker game she frequented with her country club friends. She wasn't trying to fix a hole I created. She was trying to plug a sinking ship of her own making, and my retirement savings were her last life raft. I carefully photographed every single document with my smartphone, placing everything exactly back where I found it. My heart pounded against my ribs as I walked back to my room. She thought I was just a sad, helpless old man who would fold under pressure. She had given me an ultimatum, but I was about to give her a reality check she would never forget. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of my oldest friend, Benjamin Hayes, a retired corporate attorney whose bite was still much worse than his bark. "Ben," I said when he answered, "I need a favor, and I need to draw up some very specific legal documents before Friday." Ben Hayes was a man who looked like he had been carved out of a block of granite. He had been my lawyer, my golf partner, and my closest confidant for over 30 years. We met at a dimly lit diner on the outskirts of Westport, the morning after my grim discovery. I slid the manila folder containing the printed photographs of Lucy's financial ruin across the Formica table. Ben adjusted his reading glasses, taking a sip of his black coffee as he flipped through the printouts. The diner hummed with the sound of clinking silverware and low chatter, but at our booth, the silence was heavy. I watched his jaw tighten with every page he turned. "She's leveraged to the hilt, Arthur," Ben said finally, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "These private loan documents, they are predatory. The interest rates are astronomical. She's been borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and now Peter is threatening to break her kneecaps, financially speaking. She has drained David's secondary accounts, and she's secretly taken out a second mortgage on the house using a forged signature." My blood ran cold. A second mortgage? How is that even possible without David knowing? Electronic signatures. Notary fraud. It happens more often than you'd think when one spouse controls the mail and the daily finances, Ben explained, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Arthur, she's facing federal wire fraud charges if David decides to press them. But right now, her immediate problem is liquidity. She needs cash to keep these private lenders from foreclosing or suing her into oblivion. That's why she wants your $600,000. I leaned back against the vinyl booth, feeling a mix of profound sadness for my son and a boiling rage toward the woman who was systematically destroying his life. She told me I have until Friday to transfer the money to a joint account, or she's kicking me out and telling David I've lost my mind. A slow, dangerous smile crept onto Ben's face. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted a wounded gazelle. She thinks she holds all the cards, but she clearly doesn't know how I drafted the paperwork for that $250,000 gift you gave them. I blinked, trying to recall the frantic weeks after Martha's passing. "What do you mean? I just wired them the money." "You did, but on my advice, we didn't structure it as a simple cash gift," Ben said, leaning in. "Remember? We structured it as a zero-interest promissory note, secured by a deed of trust on the property. It was to protect your assets from excessive gift taxes, but it also means you hold a legal lien on that house." She cannot legally evict you. You are, for all intents and purposes, a partial owner. And better yet, the note had a demand clause. You can call the loan due at any time. Relief washed over me so powerfully I almost laughed. Martha had always said Ben was worth his weight in gold. So, what's the play? I asked. The play is, we let her dig her grave a little deeper, Ben said, pulling a digital voice recorder out of his briefcase and sliding it across the table. You go back there. You play the frightened, desperate old man. Get her to repeat her threats on tape. In Connecticut, you only need one party's consent to record a conversation. You are that party. Get her to admit why she needs the money. Meanwhile, I am going to make a phone call to a very specific corporate office in London. My eyes widened. You're going to call David? I'm going to tell him there is a severe legal emergency regarding the property title that requires his immediate presence, Ben said. He's flying back Thursday night. He will be walking through the front door right when her Friday deadline expires. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in psychological endurance. I returned to the house and maintained a demeanor of terrified submission. Lucy strutted around the estate like a queen who had just conquered a neighboring kingdom. She flaunted her perceived victory, leaving travel brochures for luxury resorts on the kitchen counter places she intended to visit with my retirement money. On Thursday evening, she cornered me in the hallway. Tomorrow morning, Arthur, 9 a.m. sharp. We are going to the bank. Have you gathered your account details? I'm trying, Lucy, I stammered, looking down at the floor, perfectly playing the part. It's just a lot of money. I don't understand why you need all of it. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. Because you owe us for your keep. Don't make this difficult, old man. If you stall, your bags will be on the lawn before noon. I nodded meekly and retreated to my room. I checked my phone. A text from Ben read, "Target is in the air. Scheduled to land at JFK at 6 a.m. A car is waiting to bring him straight home." The trap was primed. All I had to do was pull the lever. Friday morning dawned crisp and bitterly cold, the Connecticut frost clinging to the massive windows of the farmhouse. I was in the kitchen at 8:30, nursing a cup of tea. My digital recorder was switched on, tucked safely in the breast pocket of my cardigan. At exactly 8:45, the heavy oak front door groaned open, but it was far too quiet to be Lucy coming downstairs. I peeked around the corner. David had arrived. He looked exhausted, his suit wrinkled from the transatlantic flight, dark circles bruising his eyes. Ben had told him to enter quietly and wait in the mudroom off the kitchen until he heard his cue. David caught my eye, his face pale and tight with anxiety. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. He didn't know the details yet, only that something was critically wrong. At 9 o'clock, the clatter of heels echoed down the grand staircase. Lucy marched into the kitchen, dressed in a sleek designer trench coat, clutching her keys. She looked at me, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "Time's up, Arthur. Put your shoes on. We're going to the bank." I remained seated at the island, wrapping my hands around my mug. "Lucy, please. I thought about it all night. I can't give you my life savings. It's everything Martha and I worked for. I'll give you $10,000 to help with expenses, but you can't take everything." Her face twisted into an ugly snarl. The mask completely fell away. She slammed her hands down on the granite countertop. "I don't want $10,000, you pathetic old leech. I need the full $600,000, and I need it today." Her voice shrill, echoing off the high ceilings. "But why?" I pleaded, leaning forward to ensure the microphone caught every syllable. "David makes a fortune. Why do you need my money?" "Because David is a clueless idiot who never looks at the bank statements," she screamed, completely unhinged. "He doesn't know I took out a second mortgage. He doesn't know about the private loans. If I don't pay the Vanguard Group 200 grand by Monday, they are going to foreclose on this house, and I am not losing my lifestyle because of you. You owe me. You live here for free. So you're stealing my retirement to cover up your embezzlement and fraud? I asked, keeping my voice perfectly calm. It's not stealing if I force you to sign it over, she spat. Now get up, or I swear to God, I will drag you out by your collar and leave you in the gutter. You have no rights here. This is my house. Actually, Lucy, a hollow, broken voice echoed from the mudroom doorway. It's not. Lucy spun around so fast she nearly lost her footing. All the color drained from her perfectly contoured face. She looked as if she had just seen a ghost. David stepped into the harsh morning light of the kitchen. He wasn't looking at me. His eyes were locked on his wife, filled with a mixture of absolute horror and shattering heartbreak. David, Lucy whispered, her voice trembling. The arrogant tyrant from 2 seconds ago vanished, replaced by a panicked animal caught in a snare. What are you doing home? You're supposed to be in London. David slowly walked toward the kitchen island. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope, the duplicate files Ben had prepared and handed to him in the car ride over. He slammed them onto the counter right next to Lucy's designer purse. Ben's courier met me at the airport. I've spent the last 2 hours reading through forged loan documents, maxed out credit lines, and offshore wire transfers, David said, his voice eerily quiet. You forged my signature. You stole from our daughter's college fund, and you just admitted on tape to trying to extort my father. No, David, you don't understand, Lucy cried, reaching for his arm. He stepped back in disgust, refusing to let her touch him. He manipulated me. Your father. He's been driving me crazy. He's trying to ruin our marriage. Stop lying, David roared, the sound vibrating through the floorboards. I heard you, Lucy. I stood right there and heard you threaten to throw an old man into the gutter to cover your gambling debts. I stood up, pulling the recorder from my pocket, and clicked it off. The silence that followed was suffocating. There's one more thing you should know, Lucy, I said, my voice steady and commanding. I wasn't the frightened lodger anymore. I was Arthur, the man who had worked 40 years to protect his family. You told me I had no rights here. You're wrong. That $250,000 I gave you wasn't a gift. It was a promissory note secured by the deed. I hold a lien on this property. Lucy's eyes widened in sheer terror. And as of this morning, I continued, pulling a crisp legal document from my own folder and sliding it toward her, I am calling the loan due. Since you have secretly encumbered the property with illegal secondary loans, violating the terms of our trust, I have the right to foreclose on your equity. She stared at the paper as if it were coated in poison. She looked back and forth between David and me, finally realizing that the old man she thought she could bully had meticulously engineered her total destruction. David, please, she sobbed, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. We can fix this. We can sell the house. We can start over. There is no we anymore, David said, his voice breaking, tears shining in his own eyes. Ben has already drafted the divorce papers. The fraud unit of the local police department has been notified about the forged mortgage documents. You need to pack a bag, Lucy. You are leaving now. You can't kick me out. I'm your wife. Where am I supposed to go? She shrieked, panic fully taking over. You can go find somewhere else to live, I said softly, throwing her own words right back at her. Because you certainly aren't living here for free. The fallout was nuclear, but it was necessary. Lucy refused to leave gracefully, resulting in David having to call the authorities to escort her off the property. Watching the police lead her out of the grand front doors while she screamed obscenities was a grim, ugly moment. But it was the first step toward reclaiming our peace. The legal battles that followed were fierce. Lucy tried to fight for alimony, but the mountain of evidence detailing her financial crimes, embezzlement, and forgery left her lawyers with nothing to stand on. Facing potential federal prison time for wire fraud, she was forced into a brutal plea deal. She surrendered all claims to the house and the remaining marital assets in exchange for David not pushing the district attorney for the maximum sentence. She ended up moving into a cramped, one-bedroom apartment on the bad side of New Haven, working as a receptionist to pay off court-ordered restitution. The high society luncheons and designer handbags were gone forever. Hard karma, it turns out, rarely misses its target. As for David, the betrayal nearly broke him, but he proved he was his mother's son. He was resilient. With Ben's help, we untangled the financial mess. We managed to restructure the debt, and with my retirement savings, the very money Lucy tried to steal, we bought out the predatory private lenders and secured the house. I didn't move back to Ohio. The sprawling modern farmhouse is quieter now, but it's no longer filled with toxic tension. We hired a new housekeeper, and I went back to doing what I loved, tending the gardens and watching Lily grow. In the evenings, David and I sit on the wraparound porch, drinking coffee and talking about everything and nothing. Lucy thought she could prey on the vulnerable to fund her vanity, assuming an old widower would just fade into the background. She forgot one fundamental truth. A father will do whatever it takes to protect his son. I didn't just save my money, I saved my family. If Arthur's strategic brilliance and the ultimate delivery of hard karma had you hooked, hit that like button right now. Lucy definitely got exactly what she deserved for trying to extort family. What would you have done in Arthur's shoes? Let us know down in the comments. Don't forget to share this video with someone who loves a satisfying plot twist, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life stories of justice and revenge.